The Wizard of Oz is a classic film that helped shape the childhood of people worldwide. Released in 1939, The Wizard of Oz explores the concept of two worlds, heavily using color and sound expertly to do so. Victor Fleming brings L. Frank Baum's fantasy stories alive on a big screen masterfully by exploring themes of self-belief, perseverance, home, and friendship. Fleming implores young viewers to draw comparisons to their own lives and make decisions about their future in the process. Characters such as Dorothy, the Lion, and the Wicked Witch of the West all play roles in demonstrating the different traits of humanity and how they can be corruptive to a person while also showing how to overcome them. The idea of two worlds, as demonstrated by the famous quote, "Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore," sets up the crux of the film, which is, on a surface level, that Dorothy is lost in a foreign land and needs to get back home to Kansas. However, on a deeper level, it explores the separation of one's fantasy from reality, and how in tough times people can seek refuge from their issues by separating reality and fantasy and choosing to live in the fantasy. The extract begins with an outdoor view of the violent tornado and Dorothy's house at 00. After, the camera moves inside to show frantic Dorothy calling out for her aunt in a panic at 003. Before the window is blown off its hinges, knocking Dorothy unconscious at 006, the camera then fades over an image of an unconscious Dorothy to show the house being taken up in the air by the tornado between 011 and 030, before panning from the window to a medium shot to show Dorothy and Toto in Dorothy's bedroom at 031. The medium shot is in black and white and shows Dorothy and Toto on the bed, with a view out of Dorothy's bedroom window. As the scene progresses, the viewer begins to see things appear out the window between 035 and 140. Firstly, we see normal farm things such as a tree, a chicken coop, and a chicken coop, which can be identified as the chickens are audibly clucking. At this moment, we hear a classic rooster crow which awakens Dorothy to find the house within the tornado. Visibly confused, Dorothy then looks out the window to see an old woman in a rocking chair, knitting, and a cow flying through the tornado. This is a clear sign to the viewers that Dorothy is hallucinating as a result of her head injury. She also sees two people rowing a boat, and they wave to her. As she sees this, the upbeat, frantic music becomes more cheerful and comedic, as it is a comedic moment for the viewers to see an old woman casually knitting in a tornado, as if nothing is unusual at all. However, as the cow and the men in the rowboat leave the shot, Dorothy establishes for sure that they are in fact, quote, in the cyclone, end quote. The music changes as Dorothy's neighbor is seen riding her bike on the tornado. The music becomes menacing and disturbing as the neighbor morphs from a woman on a bike to a witch on a broomstick. Finally, the scene ends with the house crash landing and music stopping altogether into silence. Dorothy leaves the house to inspect where she has landed, and as she opens the door, the shot explodes into vibrant color, signaling that they have entered a new foreign, unknown land at 2 minutes 30. Dorothy slowly explores the strange and colorful land she has landed in as we see peculiar small people emerging from the foliage, spying on Dorothy from afar. Dorothy is then greeted by the Munchkins and the Good Witch of the North at 4:46. As Somewhere Over the Rainbow softly plays, calming the audience after a hectic opening scene, the camera pans over the colorful Munchkin land to show the fantasy Dorothy has created. The song choice is perfect for this shot, as it's very recognizable for the audience, and the very song of the title suggests that they have landed in a foresty fantasy land, quote, over the rainbow, end quote. After she is greeted, they break into a musical act as all various types of groups of Munchkins thank Dorothy for killing the Wicked Witch of the North, the Wicked Witch of the East, between 5 minutes 59 and 12 minutes 07. This shows the audience that in her own fantasy, Dorothy is the heroine. They then inform her that in order to get, quote, home, she needs to go see the Wizard of Oz in the Emerald City. And to get there, she needs to follow the yellow brick road. This scene is a fun, colourful and musical exploration into the fantasy and further feeds into the idea of two worlds, as it is drastically contrasts from the colour scheme and and soundtrack of Kansas in the previous scene. The scene also ensures that to plant thematic seeds for the rest of the film by showing the Wicked Witch of the East's ruby slippers and the arrival of the Wicked Witch of the West. The choice of Fleming to use black and white when in the tornado and in Kansas allows viewers to better separate the two worlds, one being the boring and lifeless reality and one being the vibrant, exciting, and colourful fantasy land. The distinct split between the black and white and the colour clearly splits the two worlds for viewers, making it easy for younger audiences to understand the separation of fantasy and reality visually. When Dorothy's neighbour, Mrs. Scott, morphs into from a woman on a bike to a witch on a broomstick, it shows the audience the future parallels that will be made in the film, and how each character will represent a real person in Dorothy's life through a fantastical gaze. It demonstrates the running theme of the film early, which is that Dorothy is separating reality from fantasy as to not have to properly deal with her issues. Characters like the Wicked Witch of the East act as guardians of the threshold between the two worlds, and in turn, people who have prevented Dorothy from delving into Fantasyland in real life, according to Houdin. The lighting of the set throughout the film and this extract are large indicators of the difference between the worlds. In scenes of distress and fear, such as when they're being attacked by the monkeys and taken to the Wicked Witch of the West, the set is very dark and gloomy, while when they're in a happy and exciting time, such as in Munchkinland or the Emerald City, the set is lit up and vibrant to show off the colours of the characters alike. Throughout the rest of the film, while many different themes are explored, most feed back to the idea of two worlds and the separation of one's mind from reality and fantasy. The introduction of the Tin Man, Scarecrow, and Lion Man are prime examples of this. Each is missing a trait that they long for and accompany Dorothy to Emerald City in search of them. While this is initially seems to feed into the theme of self-belief, and it certainly does, fundamentally it once more demonstrates that when faced with adversity, people separate reality from fantasy and hide in fantasy to escape their problems. Dallenberg et al. Supports this notion, as they found in their research the tendency of people, particularly under the age of 30, to disassociate from their trauma in made-up fantasies concocted completely in their heads rather than face their trauma when it comes to terms with it. In the case of Dorothy, a natural disaster like a tornado that has the potential to ravage her entire home, coupled with the blow to her head, act as significant trauma triggers which can explain the psychological safety mechanism to disassociate. This dissociative behavior is consistent with that of young people who have experienced similar or even greater trauma, and therefore lends itself to the concept of two worlds, as Dorothy tries to escape the trauma of her current real-world situation. This is also supported by Spiegel, who also found that people with dissociative disorders tend to have experienced trauma triggers in their past, much like Dorothy has here. Another aspect of the film that feeds itself into the idea of two worlds are the parallels between Dorothy's home in Kansas and the fantasy world she has created. Characters like the Wicked Witch of the West, the Scarecrow, and Dorothy's other friends mirror people in Dorothy's real life. We know this because in the first tornado scene between 035 and 140, we see Dorothy's neighbour, Mrs. Scott, morph from a woman on a bike to a witch on a broomstick. This occurs because characters in the fantasy likely represent how Dorothy sees people in real life. For example, Dorothy likely sees the Lion Man as a coward, the Scarecrow as heartless, and the Wicked Witch as evil. By making these parallels, Dorothy further feeds into the idea of two worlds by creating constant links between the two worlds and that the viewer can easily identify. Furthermore, creating these links is also consistent with the common dissociative disorders according to Scale. The Wizard of Oz perfectly exposes the dissociative behavior that often comes when a person is unable or refuses to deal with their trauma. Fleming is able to expertly separate the two worlds of fantasy and reality through the use of several cinematic techniques, such as color, sound, and set, which in turn allows audiences insight into Dorothy's psychological state and how she deals with the trauma of the tornado and her head injury.